With how often trenches have been shown during the war in Ukraine, there's been a lot of comparisons drawn to the stalemate fights of World War One, but it's starting to look more and more like we're seeing another aspect from that war pop up as well, an ever-rising death toll from a relatively insignificant piece of land. Let's talk about Bakhmut. Bakhmut is a town in Donetsk, eastern Ukraine. Technically, it falls in that area, one of the areas that was annexed by Russia a little over a month ago, and it's been the site of pretty heavy fighting since around May, or at least towards the start of the summer. Pre-war, it had a population of around 70,000, but after folks have fled and or been killed, it's hard to tell how many of them remain today. Now, while the lines have shifted quite a bit in the north and south over the last few months, generally speaking, in the east, they've been pretty consistent. Now, some of those areas tend to be quiet, but others are consistently intense. Bakhmut is the latter. It's hard to verify any claims coming out of this war in general, and narrowing it down to a specific town, not something I'm going to try to tackle. It'd just be too much guesswork that wouldn't really benefit anybody. But I will say at times I've seen reports come out from Russia that says Ukraine has lost upwards of 200 men a day in Bakhmut at various times, not every single day. And from Ukraine, I haven't heard as much in terms of numbers, more just that it's a constant meat grinder of Russian forces being thrown into the killing fields. Again, I don't know that I would necessarily run with any specific numbers, but at the very least, we know that it's been a long, brutal fight with a lot of casualties. So as things have somewhat quieted in the north and south after Ukraine's push in Kharkiv and Kherson, respectively, Bakhmut has continued to see fierce fighting and has included what looks to be a sizable force from the private military company, the Wagner Group. So why is this area worth the grind in manpower and equipment? Honestly, it's kind of hard to say. For Ukraine, it isn't. They, of course, want to hold all the territory they can, and given how little the lines around Bakhmut have moved over the last few months, they clearly have a decent defensive position. Not daily, but close to it. There are reports on Telegram talking about Russian or Wagner Group attacks against Bakhmut. They've taken some territory. If you look at this map and the difference from October 21st on the left to November 21st on the right, the Russian-held areas are in the red, but not all that much has changed over the last few months, and the casualties on both sides continue to rise. It's hard to parse out a strategic objective tied to Bakhmut. There is a road passing through to the northwest that connects the town to Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. 6 to 9 months ago, it would have looked like the clear purpose: take the road and drive forward, cutting off Ukrainian forces to the east, maybe even pushing further towards Izium, but not today. That sort of rapid advance through contested lines just hasn't been a realistic part of this war for some time. So Russia could take Bakhmut, and then they'd be fighting once again for every meter north of the city. That's generally how it's played out elsewhere when gains are made, and safe to assume the same would happen here. Where I tend to fall is that the battle for Bakhmut tends to be tied to pride. Pride of the Russian forces overall, and more specifically, pride within the Wagner Group. Russia suffered some setbacks over the last few months. We can debate whether those were critical versus just annoying, but nonetheless, the fact that they no longer hold some of the territory that they annexed is at least sending some mixed messages. A victory in Bakhmut would show that Russian forces are still able to pick a fight and win. Maybe that's something to lean on in whatever comes next in this war. High level, I know that kind of sounds wasteful and silly, but morale can be really important in an army, and you never know what singular event it could swing on. Adding to that complexity, I do think there's a chance that the Wagner Group, who's been heavily involved in the Bakhmut fight, wants to show that even as the Russian army withdraws in the north and the south, they're still able to push forward. Almost comes across like an inter-service rivalry. Think the army couldn't do it, but the Marines can, kind of thing. Does that translate into more trust for the organization within the Russian government, funding, equipment, just something to brag about? I don't know. But given the Wagner Group's involvement in the conflict and here at Bakhmut, it does seem like something to consider as to why they keep pushing. Whatever the reason, Russian forces continue their assault on Bakhmut, and from everything I've seen and read, it's coming at a pretty substantial cost. But that'll do it for now. We'll see y'all next time.